Guess how many weeks a woman is pregnant? 40. And, 40 is an amplification of the number 4, which in Jung's theory and thinking had to do with structural wholeness. So it's the right amount of time for something to grow and ripen in the psyche. And she is under 40 mattresses and eiderdown feather beds. Aha.
Welcome to This Jungian Life. 3 good friends and Jungian analysts, Lisa Marciano, Deborah Stewart, and Joseph Lee, invite you to join them for an intimate and honest conversation that brings a psychological perspective to important issues of the day.
I'm Lisa Marciano, and I'm a Jungian analyst in Philadelphia.
I'm Joseph Lee, and I'm a Jungian analyst in Virginia Beach, Virginia.
I'm Deborah Stewart, a Jungian analyst on Cape Cod. This week, as Lisa can't be here, Joseph and I are going to do, as we've done before, a fairy tale and unpack it, see what all its layers, nuances, and possible meanings are. And I especially wanted to do this one. It's a tale by Hans Christian Andersen from about 1835. So it's pretty recent in the genre that we call fairy tales, but it's imaginative and symbolic material, and perhaps after another 1,000 years have gone by, it will have been granted official fairy tale status. This was a story I read as a child, and I believed every single word. I've gone back to it several times, and I'm really looking forward to seeing all of its nuances and possible meanings, and also the fun embedded in this fairy tale, The Princess and the Pea. And here is the story. It's very short. Once upon a time, there was a prince who wanted to marry a princess, but she would have to be a real one. He traveled around the whole world looking for her, but every time he met a princess, there was always something amiss. There were plenty of princesses, but not one of them was quite to his taste. Something was always the matter. They just weren't real princesses. So he returned home very sad and sorry, for he had set his heart on marrying a real princess. One evening, a storm broke over the kingdom. The lightning flashed, the thunder roared, and the rain came down in bucketfuls. In the midst of this horrible storm, someone knocked on the city gate, and the king himself went down to open it. On the other side of the gate stood a princess, but goodness, how wet she was. Water ran down her hair and her clothes in streams. It flowed in through the heels of her shoes and out through the toes. But she said that she was a real princess. We'll find that out quickly enough, thought the old queen, but she didn't say a word out loud. She hurried to the guest room and took all the bedclothes off the bed. Then, on the bare bedstead, she put a pea. On top of the pea, she put 20 mattresses, and on top of the mattresses, 20 eiderdown quilts. That was the bed on which the princess had to sleep. In the morning, when someone asked her how she had slept, she replied, "Oh, just wretchedly. I didn't close my eyes once the whole night through. God knows what was in that bed, but it was something hard, and I'm black and blue all over." Now they knew that she was a real princess, since she had felt the pea that was lying on the bedspread through 20 mattresses and 20 eiderdown quilts. Only a real princess could be so sensitive. The prince married her, The P was exhibited in the Royal Museum, and you can go there and see it if it hasn't been stolen. Now that's a real story.
And as a little girl, that last phrase really stuck. Hans Christian Andersen said, "It's real, it's got to be real."
It's a real story, like the real princess.
Yes, exactly. When we're looking at a tale, we can take several different lenses. Often we might decide this is a male psyche or a female psyche because the various figures might be interpreted somewhat differently. So if we imagine that this is in a male psyche, then there would be an identification with the prince. If it was a female psyche, there might be an identification with the queen or the princess. And then we might interpret it like a dream. And so the dream, so to speak, opens. And lo and behold, there's a prince, and he's single, he is unpartnered, he's incomplete. And he has this great energy to find his mate.
Yeah. He travels the whole world looking for her.
And in his evaluations, it just doesn't line up. So the first thing is the real. What does that mean? The real princess.
My thought is two things. One is she has to be perfect for him, according to his standard and his evaluation. There cannot be anything amiss. And that's what the book says. There was always something amiss every time he thought he'd found a princess. So, yeah, maybe her hair color was a little off, or she was too tall or not tall enough, or maybe she had a little facial tic or something. So we don't know whether he has a standard in his mind that is an idealization, a concept, an image of something unattainable, or whether he's actually pretty discriminating and a certain kind of authenticity just doesn't come through.
Yeah, there's a wisdom, at least in the language, because I could imagine, even in the courtly world, all the artifice of the court, all the layers of clothing and pomp and circumstance and crowns, that it could be very difficult to peer through all of the trappings to wonder who's the real princess, who's the real person behind all of the stuff of royalty.
Ah.
And lo and behold, he has delivered a young woman who is very real and not
Not fancy.
Not fancy.
Right.
Not fancy at all.
I want to pick up on what you said about the princesses in their various castles, adorned and begowned and all the rest of it, that there would be a tremendous amount of persona in all the attire and courtly etiquette and propriety and all of that stuff that would make it hard to feel into who's really real. All the status and mannerisms of what people think of as royalty.
And I would imagine that there's all of this political negotiation, how much access they would even have to each other with these politically arranged matings, contracts and money and dowries and all this stuff.
It's a business.
It's a business, and it has very little to do with soul and love. But there's something I think that's unique, is the prince is in a unique position that he gets to vet his spouse, which actually in those ancient monarchies, that wasn't really the case. The parents were doing this for political alliances, but he owns himself to some degree. He may not be, we don't know how sophisticated or how insightful he is, but he is at least, he's curious and he is searching.
And the other possibility here, though, is that he's impossibly entitled. That if he searched the whole world over, that must have been quite some number of princesses that got assessed and audited and auditioned and interviewed. And part of me wants to go like, really? Out of all those, 173 princesses, 482 princesses, there wasn't one that you thought you could be compatible with, who was just human, who would be a fine and suitable mate for life in the real world?
Apparently not.
Right. Exactly so. Apparently not.
And I would say that in a world that we live in with a 50% divorce rate, people might need to search a little bit harder to find the right mate before you kind of grab the marital reins.
That was great. Apparently not. So, so as if this were a dream, we would do the when then thing. So when our prince cannot find a princess despite all of his efforts, then what happens?
Fate steps in.
A storm breaks over the kingdom with lightning and thunder and pouring down rain. So psychically, what does that mean?
The unconscious brings what the persona ego could not procure. That something greater than the ego is activated.
Uh-huh.
And the other thing which the tale doesn't tell is, I was joking, but the ego has failed. And there is something important about the ego failing, that he's not omnipotent. He can't find the thing he wants, that he doesn't either have the competency or the insight or the energy, but that he's going home a failure. But that also sets a stage for perhaps also a level of openness. Because when you start out, he's full of himself and full of fantasies and pomp and circumstance, but the 100,000th failure, and then he's slouching home, can't do it.
Oftentimes, too, I think, it's a storm in the psyche.
A storm in the psyche, yes.
Everything breaks loose, the thunder and the lightning. And rain often is a symbol for feeling.
Yeah.
Our tears and the torrents of tears and feeling and wetness pouring down from above, which is when our princess appears.
Drenched. And I love those images. It's so wet. Water runs in through her heel and out the toes of the shoes. That's a very interesting choice. That the shoes are somehow exemplary of how much water there really is here.
And I love the contrast between the prince, going around to castle after courtly pomp and circumstance. And this is the exact opposite. She's soaking wet. It's nighttime, thunder and lightning, and she must have been the most drenched, bedraggled human being on earth at that moment. No persona is going on here.
And that alchemically, that the opus begins in darkness and confusion and chaos. So that his personality is incomplete. He's in a very structured world, and the unconscious needs to send a storm, needs to shake things up for him to perhaps even be able to be sensitive enough to perceive her truly.
And also, the opus often begins in solutio. Everything breaks down and is brought back to its original state in solution. So tears are solutio, and certainly this rainstorm is evocative of taking everything right back to basics. Whatever fine gown she might have started out the day in is, sorry, soggy mess by this time.
Yes. And then we have a gate.
Yes. Oh, that's right, the gate. Mm-hmm.
So the citadel is locked. They're all isolated in there, and the princes, no one can get in.
Yeah.
And somehow, I can't imagine that the king is out there in the rain standing at the gate. But the cries of the true anima, the true princess, somehow penetrate the defenses, because gates and the walls around a palace are defenses. They block the way. But somehow her voice is heard, her claim of legitimacy.
Yeah.
And the ruling principle in the psyche goes out, gets wet, goes to the gate, and does the first evaluation and decides, yes, we will set aside at least one level of the defensive structure of the psyche to examine this uncanny appearance.
You're right. But how would the king even hear somebody knocking at the gate with all that thunder and lightning and
Yes.
the rain hitting all the rooftops?
So we're already in an uncanny thing, and nobody would expect a king to go out through the muddy courtyard where people are throwing their piss pots to open up a gate. I mean, it's a very lowly thing to do.
I do like to imagine that he had an umbrella.
There you go.
But be that as it may, he nevertheless, as you say, he goes out there in the storm to open the gate, to open the defense, and let this bedraggled creature in simply because she says she's a real princess. You don't have any proof, you don't have any fine jewels, you don't have a letter of recommendation from, the court attorney.
Or diplomats having been sent a month before.
Right. It sort of gives me the idea that all kinds of things I could just claim, and people would say, yeah, sure, right, out you go.
But the thing that's being demonstrated is that he's the one carrying all the desire in the beginning. He's going out, he's beckoning, he's reaching. And this is ostensibly the first princess who has desire and reaches for him.
Yeah. Although it's the king and not the prince.
Oh yes, but she has traveled to the kingdom. She's got the agency.
And I like that. Your point's well taken that what is being sought somehow receives a message. We don't know how.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes through in a way, the worst possible way. But I'm also thinking about how it is the king that answers the pounding on the gate and lets her in. So now the parents of our prince have entered the tale.
Right.
All the princess has to do is say she said she was a real princess.
Well, that's the beginning of a conversation. The king is curious. He's willing to have the encounter. And he feels safe enough. She doesn't seem threatening. But the mother principle, it's the great mother who also lets her in. But she's the one who is going to provide the discernment that the prince ostensibly would not be able to conjure.
Exactly. Oftentimes in fairy tales, some bedraggled creature, in Six Swans, there's at this point a naked girl in a tree, and the king takes her home with him. In The Handless Maiden, here's our orphaned heroine missing her hands. The king takes her in. And Allerlio, the Many Furs tale, she is allowed to be in the scullery, given a little room under the stairs somewhere like Harry Potter. But our princess is taken right on into the castle where, I love this, the old queen will find out quickly enough, says the old queen, like, yeah, well, from Missouri. You got to show me.
Absolutely. And interestingly, because of the condition within which the princess comes, the Great Mother now has access to create the test that I'm not sure she would have been able to deliver when the prince is running around in everyone else's kingdom. She has enough control over the psychic environment to then introduce her own evaluative process.
Of all the things that you or I might think of to evaluate the authenticity of a princess, this one takes the cake. 20 mattresses and 20 eiderdown feather beds. It's such a hilarious and vivid image, and many an artist has had a wonderful time. And then there was a musical play.
Carol Burnett did a show with it, right? Spoofing it.
She did a show, and there's a comedy called Once Upon a Mattress. Everybody has had a lot of fun with this particular characterological assessment.
And it happens in the bedroom, which is the conjugal space. So the Great Mother prepares this very exaggerated thing. I don't know, it may have seemed very luxurious for the queen. I'm not sure how they tossed her up on this pile of mattresses.
I've often thought about that too, is how the heck do you get up there? It's hard enough getting to the top bunk.
And the Great Mother is going to provide the ordeal, the initiatic ordeal.
Ah, yes, indeed.
The princess must somehow exhibit the right thing.
And she does.
And she does. She passes the test of vulnerability.
Poor darling. She's black and blue all over the next day. Now, the story doesn't say that somebody, her supposed future mother-in-law took a look at her and went, oh my gosh, look at this, poor child is really hurting. Again, it's just the princess herself who says, I'm black and blue all over.
She has her own voice.
But that's the right answer, isn't it?
It is. It absolutely is. And that she expects to be heard, and she expects her suffering to be validated. And let's talk about the pea. What is a pea? It's a seed. First of all, it's a seed. If you plant a dried pea, it would grow into a plant. So it has something to do with seed. It has to do with growth that is held in reserve. It's the smallest kernel with the largest effect. The stone rejected by the builders. Semen, the thing that is not fertile in the environment. So the fact that it's a pea versus a jewel or a dagger, there's something about the fact that it's a seed that she is so vulnerable to. And it turns out to be precious because it then gives the information that is needed. So it's both vile in as much as it hurts, but it's also precious because it is the determinant that allows the truth, the real thing, to be revealed.
Now, there are some variations on this tale. There's one from India where it's about 3 princesses. And each one of them is really injured. They're knocked unconscious by a falling flower petal because they are so sensitive. And yet another one where there's some sensitive prince who there's a single hair under his mattress and he feels that. So at this point, I can't help but start to entertain the hypothesis that no doubt many listeners already there of, is this a satire? Is this a spoof? And I remember as a kid being so puzzled about, was it a pea or was it a dried pea? I mean, at least, in other words, was it hard? Did it have a kernel like popcorn?
Or was it a mushy canned pea?
Right. Of like, wouldn't it get squished under all those mattresses? I was a very literal child.
Yes, of course. It makes perfect sense.
But here we have something that is obviously pretty silly.
Well, and we could imagine that Hans Christian Andersen is poking fun at royals who were just so precious, so pampered.
Yes.
They just couldn't possibly tolerate a real life. So he's poking, perhaps consciously he thinks he's being satirical, but we can still imagine it seriously. And I want to take a moment to think about the 20 mattresses and 20 blankets, which equal 40. And 40 is a very archetypal number.
Oh, good for you, Joseph.
Because you're out in the desert for 40 years or 40 days and you're being tested.
Yeah.
So 40 is this magical number that has to do with testing and trial.
And guess how many weeks a woman is pregnant if it's full term?
40.
40. And, 40 is an amplification of the number 4, which in Jung's theory and thinking had to do with structural wholeness.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the right amount of time for something to grow and ripen in the psyche. And she is under 40 mattresses and eiderdown feather beds. Aha.
So we can imagine that there are layers of defense, layers of obfuscation, layers of persona, things that masking through the appearance of comfort and specialness.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's a little living thing, the seed, which is placed way at the bottom. And can she discern the potential of the prince, the potential of the marriage, her own possible fertility? Can she sense the secret thing through all the layers of obfuscation? And what I would suggest is the P is a metaphor for the prince. Can you see beneath the royalty, the crown, all the money and status? Can she discern something real, even as he is trying to discern something real?
Ah, fair enough. And I think there is an element of satire here. I think,
Yes, of course.
Of course, we can't miss that. And when they say only a real princess could be so sensitive, sometimes that's a way of being a little disdainful about somebody, of like, oh, well, she's just a real princess. Oh, she couldn't do that.
Yeah.
So there can be a sarcasm in that. And there are all of these symbolic, mythological, and archetypal images that hearken to something deeper. In this little story that has, I don't know, something like 8 little paragraphs in it, it's not even a page and a half in the book. There is that other element. And so if we're tempted to just sort of write it off as a spoof, and I do agree with you that there's a cultural element. There's often a cultural element in fairy tales of commenting on social and cultural norms, and the commoners and the so-called royals were forever inserting those elements into all kinds of things. So that's there too.
So we're doing something that analysts do. You might have a client come in and tell a story they think is funny. And the analyst might think it's funny, but also they're trying to look beneath the story that the ego thinks it's telling.
Yeah.
So Hans Christian Andersen may be writing this, and his conscious attitude is, oh, these royals, I'm sick and tired of them. And yet, his unconscious also has its own separate voice that very well may have put these little tells, little parapraxies, Freudian slips that tell a second interesting story, which helps the tale remain relevant through through the passage of time.
Right. I like that a lot, that lest we take things for its sort of surface value, this tiny little nugget of a tale. Think about what's underneath. There are other layers and other truths, and there's a bivalence here of, is our princess, just all taken with herself and her incredible sensitivity, or is there a reality and an authenticity here that perhaps even Hans Christian Andersen didn't really know he was putting down on paper? But there it is.
Yeah, could we look underneath the 40 layers of fluff and fun and sarcasm? There is a kernel of truth, a seed of truth underneath all of what might have been silliness.
Yeah. What do you make of the fact that the prince's parents are the ones that really get things moving? The king goes to open the gate, and the queen is the one that says, okay, let's do an assessment with the mattresses and the feather beds.
I think it has to do with the fact that the ego has failed, that whatever criteria he was trampsing around with, he couldn't get the job done. He couldn't even recognize, like you said, how was he evaluating any of these girls? And so something deeper, something supraordinate to the ego gets involved, much like the storm.
Right.
And helps something happen. And it's a great blessing. And sometimes that happens for us. We've exhausted our ability to figure something out. And then you get a dream. You didn't figure that out, but the inner ones that are watching out for you are offering something because you did everything you could, and you still need something. So I think that sometimes we're blessed that way, that something else in the psyche intervenes when we abjectly cannot do the necessary thing to be made whole.
And if we take this tale as an image of one psyche, which is the typical Jungian perspective on any fairy tale, that like a dream, all of the characters and the situation is part of one psyche. I'm just building on what you said, that the prince is young and he's callow, and he just couldn't get the job done. But the wisdom figures, his parents, the king lets in this bedraggled young woman. He somehow hears the knocking at the gate, and he lets her in. So that starts things moving. I mean, previously they'd been at a standstill. And the queen brings, as you said, the discerning power, the logos of, okay, well, we'll see about that. But again, is participating. Both those images in the psyche, the king and queen, the parents, go toward this soaking wet young woman with what an unappealing sight she must have been.
Yes, but something in them saw beneath the outer seeming of things.
Yeah.
But let me do another amplification and talk about the myth of Sophia. So in the Gnostic myth, Sophia is part of this divine order. Some disaster happens. She separates out. She falls out of the heavens and in her confusion creates this tumultuous world out of pieces of herself so that the divine feminine is lost in the world. And part of the Gnostic tradition is to find the sparks of Sophia that are lost in the world and to relate to them. So there is a secret feminine divinity in nature, in the plainness, that is hidden in the darkness. And here in the darkness of the storm, it's the middle of the night.
Yeah.
She's wet. She's like Sophia, lost in matter itself, and that it takes the wisdom of the king and the queen to hear the validity of the cry and to receive the secret, the feminine that is lost in the storm and could easily have been overlooked by someone who doesn't understand how to see.
It's such a tale of redemption, isn't it?
In that way, absolutely. It's a 2-second moment, but it's a profound moment.
Yes. That they let her in.
Right. They give her a chance. At the very least, they're going to take care of her, even if she doesn't turn out to be the one for the prince. They're not going to just ignore this suffering human outside the gate.
Yeah, it's exactly so. At least they take her in. And that actually has a lot of mythological references of Baucis and Philemon take in Hermes and Zeus in disguise where others have barred their doors.
Mm-hmm.
And this poor old couple on the outskirts of town welcomes them and prepares a meal for them. And then they notice that the pitcher that should have been emptied of the wine still has wine in it.
Miracles start happening because you open the door.
Mm-hmm. And, around the Mediterranean, it's in the Odyssey and in other tales that when Odysseus is sort of washed ashore, that there is a hospitality code and you seek out somebody who's the same social status as you, and they basically have to take you in.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a very strong guest tradition. So there is something about they let her in.
And the prince doesn't join them. So we might imagine that the ego, as in his journey, he's not mature enough to discern the thing that's hidden from him, but something deeper, wiser, more experienced can.
It's really a very nice tale with quite a moral tone to it of be open, try it out, don't judge things just by appearance, but then also use your head and come up with an evaluative process. How many mattresses does the castle have that we can stack up like this? So there's a fun, spoofy element, but also a lot of psychological wisdom.
I think so. And I find it interesting that she's bruised.
Mm-hmm.
So her body reveals the truth. That if she had just said, oh, I didn't sleep, it was terrible, well, maybe she's just saying stuff. But the fact that something that she couldn't fabricate, her body is telling a truth. That she is registering the objective reality of the pea, and it is impressing something upon her. And that is compelling evidence for the king and the queen and for the prince as well. That's a way that she's not lying, because who would willingly hurt themselves for that matter? So there are marks upon her regarding the discernment, the seed, the potential for the marriage.
It's a lovely tale, and also such a lovely tale about appearances and sensitivity. I kept thinking, here's our sensitive princess. So what is she doing out at night in the middle of a horrible storm?
That's the whole mystery there. I need the prequel to this whole story.
Yeah, I mean, she wasn't too sensitive to go out in the storm.
Yes, something's happened. She's fallen out of a carriage, some strange thing, and she's got some strength. I mean, she's walking around in a gown and open-toed shoes in the middle of a storm, knocking on gates. She has no one around her, none of her retinue is around her.
It doesn't say what she was wearing. But I like that somehow, in some mysterious way, if you are truly seeking something, it's the seeking ye shall find with a twist. Seek and it will come toward you, possibly at the worst possible time and looking in the worst possible way. But wishes can come true. You wanted a princess? Here's a princess.
Now, the other thing about reality is she is so sensitive, and that says something, because the people that are working the fields, the peasants, they're rough. The rough ones, they have calluses on their hands, their muscles are hardened.
Right.
And those are all signs of not being privileged enough to have everybody do everything for you. So the royalty are all delicate and soft and not even muscular, which was seen as a sign of privilege that way. But she's also real because she's bruised. She's imperfect. So as the prince is visiting these various princesses, they're not showing up with bruises. They're not going to subject themselves to pretty much even picking up a fork or a plate. Everything's pampered. But she's also real because she has been slightly hurt.
Yeah. Maybe she had a sensory processing disorder.
Maybe so.
Of some sort.
Her body is telling a truth, and that truth is substantive enough for it to make the difference.
I also am thinking about highly sensitive people.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot has been written about this. There's a book about it, and how people that are highly sensitive often get treated with what I think might be the typical response to this tale, which is, oh, for Pete's sake, give me a break. She feels a pea under all those mattresses and eiderdowns. That tendency to sort of gaff it off and be disdainful.
Right.
And that highly sensitive people often experience some of this of, oh, for Pete's sakes, you really have to be so sensitive about everything? Oh, just get over it. And the story, just in the words on the page, say she felt it and she was black and blue all over. So there is a validation here of you were right. There was a P. You did not make it up.
Mm-hmm.
And B, you get to marry the prince. It proves your worth. You have met the standard. The sensitivity can stand you in good stead, which I think is often true for highly sensitive people, that what they see, feel, make meaning of is actually there. And other people often want to just disparage that, but that's not important. You should just keep going. And yeah, there was a P.
So if we take the dream, as we said before, as the kingdom and all the characters, all four of them, are a psyche, and that the tale could be interpreted as a psychological event. So we have a young puer prince. He's not terribly experienced. He's doing what he does, but he's missing parts of himself. And so the missing part of the personality, which we often call the fourth function, that the part of us that is most in the unconscious, least developed, is often touchy and tyrannical even, because it hasn't been integrated, but is the necessary thing to be whole, because there are only three in the castle, and the fourth, the second coupling, comes forward, and she, like all of our functions that have not emerged or have only just emerged, there is a hypersensitivity in that it hasn't had the benefit of being worked into the personality yet, but it still is absolutely the thing that's needed for wholeness to happen. And the marital conjoining is often the symbol of wholeness, the coming together of the two disparate things to make a whole single thing. Then we have a little jest at the end, and the pea's in a museum. No one stole it, you know. So that little wink at the end goes on and on.
Yeah. So I think all in all, we've had a lot of fun with it, and it is a wonderful spoof. It's a satire. I'm sure, Hans Christian Andersen was not royalty, but he was known at that time. So he had plenty of opportunity to mingle with them. So I think we have some class resentment going on here. It's impossible to read the story without laughing. And there are some real psychological truths if we stay a little longer, use our imaginations, really kind of take a look and are willing to find those peas under the surface mattresses, so to speak, of this story, not just laugh it off and gaff it off.
And just here at the end, I want to just humanize Hans Christian Andersen, because having read a little bit about the person and his struggles and his suffering, the story is, I think, also a personal fantasy for him. Hans Christian Andersen was a gay, artistic fellow living in a world where there was no place for him. So isn't he the one at the gate, banging, abandoned, and hoping to be found and hoping to be validated? Does he have a prince somewhere in the world that can actually see him behind all of whatever else is there? Could he be recognized? And I often think of many of his tales, and I put him like he's the ugly duckling. He's the gay boy that nobody can recognize. So his aching and his loneliness, and when he did finally find somebody, after a while he was rejected and spent the rest of his life pining and alone. So he himself is a tragic figure, and many of his tales are fantasies of blooming and finding your tribe and being accepted, although at first the characters are decried and rejected and invisible. So I feel for him in this story, and yes, he's poking fun maybe at himself, and the suffering is real.
Yeah. He was an orphan, bedraggled and wet, and nobody really let him in.
Right. He's the little match girl also. You can fit him in these stories, and there's a poignancy in it, even in the tales that are silly. Are they silly? There's an ache hidden in so much of this.
Our dream is a woman who's 22. She's a student. And here is the dream. I was laying in a moored boat at night and trying to sleep, but was unable to because the moon was full and very big, and it was so intense and almost terrifying. It was shining down on me. Then the boat started flooding with water from some mechanism that was inside the boat. The boat was not sinking. There was just water pouring all over me and the bottom of the boat from a pump for drinking water, not water from the outside of the boat. And for context, she says, I've recently been seeing someone new after a long and difficult on and off relationship, and have been struggling with the transition into something healthier and less extreme. I graduate soon, and am not sure what I'm doing after this. I feel quite frightened about what potentially is opening up for me, since it's all so unfamiliar. And she says the feelings in the dream was just a lot of anxiety.
So, she is laying in a moored boat at night trying to sleep.
Yeah. and the moon was full.
So many symbols of the unconscious. So she's lying down. We have a sense that she's not expecting to be active. She's waiting. The boat is not going to go anywhere. A moored boat means it's tied either to a dock or to a buoy, but it is a stable thing. And she is trying to slip deeper into the unconscious, but that is not permitted. She's not permitted to go unconscious.
Exactly. I also love this image of the moon. That is such an archetypal image. We all know it from all kinds of songs and tales and illustrations, and it goes on. And it is very much an image of the feminine.
Mm-hmm.
Sun is often associated with the masculine and the moon with the feminine, of the thing that provides light in the night, the lunar kind of light that is softer, it waxes, it wanes. But this is a full moon. The tides are higher.
Yes. And often, if people see a big full moon, it suggests the unconscious is very active and very present.
Mm-hmm.
If it was a big, shiny sun, we might say, oh, the ego is really awake, really bright. So the unconscious is super active in this dream. And I think most importantly, the moon is big and full, and it's so intense, almost terrifying. So let's talk about that terror of the unconscious itself, and she's only 22. So much of the struggle, if we take Neumann's work, in the first half of life is separating from the unconscious. That as children, we are predominantly unconscious and instinctive little creatures. And the maturational process is the ego, corralling the instincts and also becoming increasingly more awake and more agentic and making decisions. So the unconscious is, in a sense, a kind of threat in as much as it can draw her backwards into something, while she is still, like all people in their 20s, fighting to be awake and to make good choices, which she is doing in her outer life. She's trying to make a better choice and to not fall into the unconscious pattern, which is to date impossible men, and getting free of the unconscious and feeling the power of the unconscious to kind of grab her and push her around, which is true. The unconscious is very powerful. And that's a bit of an initiation. Like, the unconscious is a bit terrifying. And Jung might say, yes, it is. And he lamented when, especially in the 40s and 50s, as the New Age movement, which he's thought to be the grandfather of, by the way, people were taking his books and they were saying things like, oh, the unconscious, it's all wisdom. Your unconscious will solve everything. And all this idealization of the unconscious came forward from his writings. And Jung kept trying to remind people, like, wait a minute. Yes, and the unconscious is full of dragons and monsters, and it can trick you into doing incredibly dangerous things. It's not all roses.
But one might think from this particular dream that, in fact, all these images of the unconscious are really pretty beneficent. First of all, she's in a boat, but it's moored.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously it's near a dock or the shore, or maybe it's in a marina, who knows. But it's moored. It's not out in the middle of the ocean. And she's trying to sleep. And here is this moon that most people love, the full moon.
Mm-hmm.
It's something wonderful and magical. Here on the Cape in the summer, one of the favorite rituals is to go to the beach the night of the full moon, because you're looking out over the Atlantic and moonrise is spectacular. And it's summer, the weather's warm, and let's go see the moon rise. Let's go out to the beach. But for her, even though it is shining down on her, it's intense and almost terrifying.
But we have to be careful not to confuse the levels, because the outer world moon, you're right, it's beautiful.
Yep.
It's not going to cause you to get flooded. It's not going to do weird things to you. But the inner moon is not the same as the outer moon. The inner moon is a living thing that has autonomous, active energy in it. And if we do the when-then formula, when the terrifying full moon shines on me, flooding happens.
Yeah. But let's look at the flooding. It's flooding with water from a mechanism, not the ocean or the lake, whatever she was. And the boat is not sinking. Nothing really terrible is happening. There's just water pouring all over me and the bottom of the boat from a pump for drinking water. So it's from within. And not only that, the water is for drinking. It's not salt water. It's not just lake water. It is water intended for human use.
Yes, but it is malfunctioning. It has lost its container. And there is a problem. I mean, if you had a boat and all of a sudden a pump started pumping water all over the boat, it's going to damage things, and it's scary. And she doesn't know why all of a sudden this saturation is everywhere.
What I'm thinking that may be somewhat different from what you're thinking is, I'm putting it in the context of the difficult on and off past relationship, something newer that's healthier, less extreme, and this huge life event of graduating and having to get out into the big, wide world. So all these things are uncomfortable and upsetting to our dream ego, but nothing really bad is going on. She's in a boat. It's moored. It's the moon. There's a mechanism inside the boat. The flooding is, it needs attention, and it's not a good thing, but it's not terrible. And it's drinking water. It's for human consumption. So nothing terrible is going on, but our dream ego is upset.
And something is required of her. She can't just lay there and go to sleep while the boat's being damaged. Like, she's got to figure out something with this problem.
Or get out of the boat.
Well, you wouldn't want to get out of the boat, because then the damage will just advance more and more and more. Like, she's got to figure if the boat matters to her, she's got to figure out the problem. If she abandons it, the damage will get worse and worse.
Right. Go get some containers to catch the water, try to fix the mechanisms.
How do you turn it off? Yeah.
But also, worst case, just get out of the boat.
Could be. Now, the boat is often a symbol for the ego.
Yes. Floating on the sea of the unconscious.
There's the unconscious above and the unconscious below.
But I find that actually very reassuring, given the life circumstances of transition and change that she's in. And I find myself wanting to say, nothing really terrible is happening, but it does feel alarming. And there are things that you can do. You still do have agency.
Right. There's a problem that the ego needs to solve as it is learning how to float upon the unconscious, how to be in the moonlight. And the ego being flooded is often a metaphor for these intense feelings. And she's saying that she feels quite frightened about what potentially is opening up for me because it's unfamiliar. So there are these feelings that get into the boat that are a bit much. It would be nice if she had a dry boat so she wasn't so impacted by unconscious material. And I think the dream is, as you said, Deb, it's letting her know that the terror may be nothing more than a pump that needs to be unplugged until you can get it replaced. That, you're not under severe threat. But the real issue is, can we kind of get a cleaner separation between the conscious and the unconscious?
Yeah.
So some of these terrors may not really belong in the job search after graduation.
It's such a tough rite of passage, isn't it?
It is.
That we're really tossed out there into a really big and overwhelming world from the confines of our family home, and then sort of this intermediary place where you get fed with all the learning and coursework. And it's called the alma mater, the all-mother. And then,
You're out in your own boat, out in the ocean.
it is a big rite of passage. There's no question about that.
It is. It is.
Thanks for listening. To submit a dream, suggest an episode topic, or join our mailing list, visit our website, thisjungianlife.com. If you enjoyed this episode, give us 5 stars and a good review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and make sure to click the notification bell to be alerted whenever we upload videos. And keep up with all things TJL by following us on Instagram, Facebook, X, and TikTok.